Good morning everyone. Welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. So today is 2nd June 2025 and today we have some very important topics for the discussion. So without any further delay, let's get into the discussion and let's try to understand all these important topics in a very detailed manner. And in fact, these articles have been covered from both Hindu and Indian Express newspapers, and we have selected those articles which are a very close resemblance to the syllabus of UPSC. And in fact, so first topic that we are going to discuss is about the urban flooding problem in India. We all knew that urban flooding is one of the major problem that the Indian cities have been facing. And we all knew that Indian cities are known as the growth engines because Indian cities have been contributing for more than 50% of India's GDP. So therefore, in this context, it is very important that a sustained and inclusive and even climate resilient urban growth, urban planning is very important for Indian urban centers. However, in recent times, due to poor planning and also the climate change and extreme weather patterns, there is an increased urban flooding problem in India. And in fact, in cities like Bengaluru, we have recently seen flooding problem. So therefore, the key challenge is to how to face urban flooding and how to make Indian cities more resilient to the urban flooding. When Indian cities are regularly impacted by the urban flooding, it impacts economy, it impacts lives of the people, and it also impacts the infrastructure that has been already developed in the urban centers. However, in this article, we will understand what are the reasons for urban flooding and how we can mitigate the problem of urban flooding and how can we actually make Indian urban centers more and more climate resilient. And in this particular editorial has been given in the Indian Express newspaper, and this editorial is very important for your General Studies paper 3. So in General Studies paper 3, there is a disaster management topic, and for the disaster management topic, so this particular editorial is very important. So we all knew, because I hope you are regularly following the newspapers, and if you are regularly following the newspapers, it is generally in news that the urban centers have been facing the problem of floods. And in fact, several metropolitan cities, whether it is Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, Hyderabad, so all these metropolitan cities have been regularly facing the problem of the floods in recent past. However, there are many reasons for urban centers to face the problem of the flooding. However, the most important problem that has to be discussed here is the problem of inefficient drainage systems which are in these urban centers. Along with that, climate change is also another major problem that has been further exacerbating the problem of the urban flooding in cities. However, now first of all, we'll try to understand the causes of urban flooding, because urban flooding has a numerous causes. So firstly, as I have already told you, that inadequate drainage system is the main problem of urban flooding. And in fact, the metropolitan cities where the population exceeds more than million, like Hyderabad, Mumbai, they mostly depend on inefficient and outdated drainage systems. And in fact, the inefficient and outdated drainage systems are not able to handle intense rainfall or torrential rainfall that took place over a very short period of time. So therefore, this situation very often leads to the problem of waterlogging and even flooding in the urban areas. Secondly, the encroachment is also another major problem that is more common in urban areas. Particularly, encroachment on natural drainage channels, encroachment on floodplains in cities like Delhi is a major problem. So, unplanned urbanization. So, urbanization which is lacking a sustained planning. So unplanned urbanization very often leads to occupation of lakes, floodplains, wetlands, riverbeds, and all these factors over a period of time leads to obstructing the natural flow of water, and it further increases the risk of urban floods. Third, climate change is also another major problem in these urban centers, because due to climate change or due to the global warming, what has been happening, there is an excessive increase in the global temperatures and increase in the sea surface temperatures as well, and that has been triggering cyclones in both Bay of Bengal and Indian Ocean as well. So extreme cyclones would also carry intense rainfall, right? So it will result in more frequent and intense rainfall events over the peninsular part of India and even the hinterland of India. Apart from that, the overwhelming and existing infrastructure. However, the inefficient infrastructure, or rather it is inefficient drainage system, all these factors have been leading to the urban flooding, and these factors are also making urban flooding a more common phenomenon. Fourth is a poor urban planning as well. We all knew that the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts have brought in the local self-governance institutions at the level of cities as well as the villages. However, the problem that these local self-governance institutions have been facing is lack of funding, lack of technical expertise, lack of skilled workforce. All these problems have been resulting in poor urban planning in majority of the cities. However, in cities also we can experience the rapid expansion, and this rapid expansion is not taking into account the natural topography and the hydrogeomorphology of those particular cities, and ultimately this has been disrupting the drainage patterns in the urban centers. And in fact, the solid waste management is also a very big problem the urban centers have been facing, particularly because of the plastic waste which has been very often clogging the drainages. And in fact, the improper disposal of waste can clog drains, and that would further obstruct the water flow, and it even leading to the waterlogging and flooding in these urban areas. So these are the major causes of urban flooding. Now when you are writing an answer, it is very important that you can also mention examples along with these points to further enrich your answer. However, in this article, the author has been specifically talked about some solutions that have to be taken in order to mitigate the problem of urban flooding and also make sure that our cities are more and more resilient to the problem of urban flooding. And in fact, it is being said that we need scientific solutions to make our cities more resilient to urban flooding. So one such solution is a simulation framework that can be developed on GIS platform. For example, the GIS platform could actually stimulate the movement of runoff, and it also tries to attune the drainage systems in these urban areas. And in fact, it also takes into account the changes in the population and also land use. So such simulation frameworks would provide it to the Delhi government, and these simulation frameworks are also capable of providing solutions to the flooding which has been taking in majority of these metropolitan cities. And apart from that, we cannot act on urban flooding without understanding the climate change, without understanding the global warming and its impact or its consequences on the urban centers. So therefore, what we need to do, in fact, is that we need to design a drainage system, because it is known fact that because of the climate change and global warming, there has been intense rainfall, and a frequency of the intense rainfall has also been increasing. So therefore, the urban drainage system has to be properly planned to deal with such problems, such exigencies. However, it is possible to reduce the severity of floods by taking a serious action. So what serious action, what plan of action that we need to take into account to mitigate or make our cities more and more resilient to the urban flooding? And in fact, it is suggested that one simple strategy that can be adopted, that can be followed, is to reduce the magnitude of stormwater. And for that, we need to take multiple steps, because dealing with urban flooding is a holistic challenge. It also requires a holistic and comprehensive solutions. So for that, what we have to do, we need to enhance the groundwater recharge. We need to create underground water storage to retain or detain the water, and we should also rejuvenate the water bodies which are already in place in these urban centers, whether they are lakes, ponds, wetlands, or artificial lakes. And in fact, it is very, very important that in these urban centers we need to stop the encroachment of the pavements and also the riverbeds and even the river channels. There are examples of cities creating rooftop gardens, and these rooftop gardens are much more efficient in retaining a part of the rainwater as well. And even in some developed countries, they have installed a big stormwater tunnels, and these big stormwater tunnels, for example in countries like Japan and China, would help carry the stormwater from the city and release it into the nearby river or water body. However, these are very expensive. They cannot be carried out with ease, but we can actually take some smaller measures, a community level measures, a government level measures. So they include enhancing the groundwater recharge, creating underground water storage or retaining the water, rejuvenating the water bodies, and stop the encroachment of the riverbeds, floodplains. So these measures have to be carried out to make the urban centers more and more resilient to the problem of urban flooding, and continue that the urban centers are the growth engines of the Indian economy, and that will also play a very, very important role in achieving the goal and objective of becoming India a developed country by the year 2047. Now, in this image, you can clearly see that there are number of reasons have been given that why urban flooding is more common or why urban flooding usually takes place. However, we have already discussed why urban flooding is a more common challenge. On the left of this particular image, you can also see the Indian map and different metropolitan cities which have faced urban flooding in recent times. However, recently, 1 week back, we have also seen Bengaluru has been facing urban floods. A number of people have lost their lives because of the urban floods, and there is a huge damage to the existing infrastructure to these urban centers. So therefore, a sustained, inclusive, holistic and comprehensive measures have to be taken in these urban areas to make our urban centers more and more resilient to the problem of urban flooding. And here you can also see that 85% of Bengaluru's water bodies have vanished in last 14 years. And in fact, in urban centers, water bodies are considered as the sponges, because they could readily absorb the impact or the influence of excess floods. However, if these water bodies continues to disappear, it is very difficult to maintain or manage the excess amount of water, and that would create a huge havoc or damage in the urban centers. And you can also see that 10% of Delhi's over 1000 water bodies are now traceable only, with 170 partly or fully encroached upon. And in fact, 44% of Kolkata's water bodies have vanished in 20 years, says a survey. So all these factors have been indicating that a state of a disarray which has been existing in India's urban centers. The next important article is about Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. we all knew that this act has been framed by the parliament, and this act has also provided the social safety net and social security net for the people who are living in the rural areas. And during COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen a wave of reverse migration. So reverse migration is a pattern of migration where people migrated from the urban areas to the rural areas. During the COVID-19 pandemic, it has provided livelihood security and income security for the majority of the people as well. And if we specifically talk about Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, 1/3 of the beneficiaries of this scheme are women. So thereby putting money in the hands of the woman, and that will result in financial empowerment, economic independence of women in rural areas, and that will also increase the decision making power of women, and thereby it will result in economic empowerment of women. So overall, in order to reduce poverty, increase the bargaining power of the farmers, Manrega will actually play a very important role in these rural areas. However, the article which has been given in the Indian Express newspaper, it says that the rural beneficiaries as part of the Narega Act or the Narega scheme is going down, and in fact the Ministry of Rural Development seeks 12% higher outlay over the next 5 years. So we are going to discuss about this in a much more detailed manner, because this is important for your prelims examination as well as the mains examination, because this is part of your general studies paper 2 syllabus. And it says that the Ministry of Rural Development has sought an outlay of 5.23 lakh crore for the Manrega program. And in fact, the Ministry of Rural Development has sought this for 5 years until 2029-30. And in fact, the outlay for the next 5 years up to 2029-30 is about 12% higher than the central release of the 4.68 lakh crore for Manrega during the previous 5 financial years in 21 to 24-25. And in fact, in this last 5 years from 2021 to 2025, it was 4.68, but now the Ministry of Rural Development has been asking for a financial outlay of more than 12% of the previous 5-year period. And in fact, if we talk about the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, so this scheme is notified by different states and union territories under Section 4 of the Manrega Act of 2005. And Section 4 of the Manrega Act 2005, it says that every state government shall within 6 months from the date of the commencement of the act by notification will announce the scheme for providing not less than 100 days of guaranteed employment in a financial year. So it says that for every rural household who is willing to do unskilled manual labor work, he or she will be provided not less than 100 days of guaranteed employment in every financial year. So this is what Section 4 of the Manrega Act 2005 says. Section 22 of the Manrega Act provides for a funding pattern of the scheme. So how would the funding pattern of the scheme would actually look like? And according to the Manrega Act, the central government is responsible for paying 100% of the cost for 3 components under the Manrega scheme. One is wages, second is administrative expenses, and third is the social audit units. It is important to prevent corruption and bring in more transparency and accountability in the working of the Manrega scheme, and for that particular reason, social audit has made mandatory in the implementation of the Manrega scheme. And apart from these 3 different wages, the central government would also provide a 3/4 of the material cost of the scheme as well. And apart from that, the state governments are now responsible for meeting the costs of the following expenses. One is the cost of unemployment allowance payable under the scheme. In case if the state government is not able to provide employment within 15 days after the notification, then the state government should provide the unemployment allowance to the willing beneficiary. Secondly, 1/4 of the material cost of the scheme, including the payment of wages to skilled and semi-skilled workers subjected to the provisions of Schedule 2 of the Manrega Act. Third, the administrative expenses of the state council that has been created under the Manrega Act would be met by the state governments alone. And in fact, this is very important for your prelims examination. And in fact, you can also see the Manrega Act here. So it says that, or it guarantees that 100 days of unskilled manual work at the statutory minimum wage. And if we talk about the funding pattern, the center covers 100% unskilled labor cost of wages and 75% of the material cost. The Manrega wages are decided by the central government based on the Consumer Price Index agricultural laborers. And the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme is implemented by the Ministry of Rural Development plus the state governments concerned. And Section 27 of the Manrega Act clearly says, or it empowers the central government to monitor and direct states for effective implementation of the scheme. And Manrega scheme would ensure the livelihood security and income security of the rural poor, and it would also arrest the distress migration from the rural areas to the urban areas as well. However, Section 27 of the Manrega Act also empowers the center that it can withhold funds if misused or enforce corrective measures as well. And in fact, as I have already told you, that Manrega is a scheme that aimed at poverty alleviation in rural areas. So therefore, it is considered as an instrument of poverty alleviation in rural areas. The purpose is, it is a safety net because it guarantees a minimum wages, it guarantees the livelihood security and income security for the rural poor. Recently, the central government has appointed a review committee of the Manrega program, and this committee is headed by Amarjit Sinha to assess the effectiveness of the overall Manrega program. And in fact, so it guarantees right to work because the state must give the rural household work on demand, and if state fail to give work to the rural poor on demand, then the state would pay the unemployment allowance. Secondly, as I have already told you, if state is not able to provide unemployment within 15 days, then the worker would be entitled for unemployment allowance as well. And in fact, the Manrega scheme has envisioned 1/3 of the beneficiaries of this scheme must be women. And apart from that, the work radius should be within 5 kilometers only, and work site facilities including the trenches, drinking water and first aid would be provided. So these are some details with respect to the Manrega program. So it has some features, and the features including 100 days of legal guarantee of work would be provided to every eligible rural household who is willing to do unskilled manual labor work. And in fact, in order to bring in transparency and accountability in the implementation of the Manrega program, social audits have been made mandatory and public disclosure of records as well. And the Gram Panchayats have been given a key role or crucial role for the planning and implementation of the Manrega at the village level, and this will give boost to the decentralized planning at the local level. And in fact, the national mobile monitoring system and Aadhaar based payments would result in digital integration of people and also the Manrega program as well. And in fact, it also provides unemployment allowance. If any eligible beneficiary is not given employment within 15 days, he or she is eligible for the unemployment allowance from the state as well. However, the responsibility to provide unemployment allowance is on the state governments. I hope you have understood this. the next very important topic is India is celebrating 300th birth anniversary of Rani Ahilyabai Holkar. We will understand who is Rani Ahilyabai Holkar and what are her contributions, because this is very important for your prelims examination and to some extent for your mains examination as well. In 2025, India celebrated the 30th birth anniversary of Rani Ahilyabai Holkar. And in fact, to commemorate this event, so several events took place across the country to honor her legacy. And these events took place in cities like Agra in Uttar Pradesh by Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath. And Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh also emphasized on the principles of self-defense and even the national pride, taking into account the contributions of Rani Ahilyabai Holkar. And Chief Minister of UP also highlighted the government's efforts to honor her memory by renaming the public institutions in her honor. And now, if we talk about the specific contributions and some details about Rani Ahilyabai Holkar, so she was born in 1725 in Ahmednagar. So Ahmednagar is currently in the state of Maharashtra. So she was born to Mankhoji Shinde and a respected Dhangar, so who served as the village Patil. And apart from that, she married Khanderao Holkar, a son of Malharrao Holkar. He is a commander under Peshwa Bajirao of Marathas. And in fact, so made a Maheshwar of Madhya Pradesh and Holkar dynasty's capital on the Narmada river. And she is known as the Queen of Indore in the Maratha Confederacy. So after her husband's death in 1754 at Battle of Khambur, Ahilyabai became Malwa's ruler. Right? And in fact, with Tukoji Rao Holkar as her military regent, she became the Malwa's ruler after the death of her husband. And in fact, she preserved India's spiritual heritage, and she also demonstrated the administrative skill as well as the political neutrality as well. And when we talk about the specific contributions of Rani Ahilyabai Holkar, so she promoted the Maheshwari saris and she played a very important role in empowerment of women. And Ahilyabai resurrected the Jyotirlingas across the country as a tribute to Lord Shiva. And in fact, she also renovated Somnath Temple and Kashi Vishwanath temples in 1780, which were destroyed by the Mughals. And she also renovated several other sacred sites, including Nasik Trambak, Gaya, Pushkar, Vrindavan, Nathdwara, Haridwar, Badrinath and Kedarnath. And she even patronized artists like Marathi poet of Moropant, Shahir Anand Gandhi and Sanskrit scholar Kaushali Ram. Ahilya repealed the law allowing the state to confiscate a childless widow's property. Remember, all these points are very important for your prelims examination, because there is a chance that this year Rani Ahilyabai or next year Rani Ahilyabai Holkar's contribution would be asked in your prelims examination. And in fact, she even developed Indore and worked to conserve forests and wildlife as well. So these are some specific contributions of Rani Ahilyabai Holkar. I hope you have understood this. And in recent times, we all knew that there is a surge in the COVID-19 cases. Now, in this context, Soumya Swaminathan, so who is a doctor of MS Swaminathan, so she recently says that there is no need to fear for the resurgence or surge in the COVID-19 pandemic, because already majority of Indians have gone through the vaccination. And because of this vaccination, Indians have acquired the immunity. this immunity is specifically called as the acquired immunity. So since we already have the acquired immunity, there is no need to fear about this wave of the fresh cases of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now in this context, we'll try to understand the difference between innate immunity and acquired immunity. Innate immunity is a defense system which an individual has from birth, and it right from the birth of an individual would acquire the immunity. It is called as innate immunity. And what is an acquired immunity that Soumya Swaminathan is talking about? So acquired immunity is the defense system which is acquired by the individual after birth. And after birth, through vaccination, an individual would acquire the acquired immunity, would get the acquired immunity. Now when we talk about the innate immunity again, so the defense mechanism actually consists of various types of barriers that interrupt the entry of pathogens. And in fact, skin is also part of the innate immunity of human beings. But on the other hand, when we talk about the acquired immunity, the defense system consists of specialized B cells and T cells, including the antibodies that regularly circulate in the body. And the innate immunity, so this defense system sustains throughout the life. Innate immunity is not short term, it is not temporary, but it sustains throughout the life of an individual. But on the other hand, the acquired immunity, it may be either short life or it is having a long life as well. It may be either temporary or permanent. So this is the difference between innate immunity and acquired immunity. So acquired immunity primarily through the vaccination after the birth of individual or birth of babies. I hope you have understood the difference between innate immunity as well as the acquired immunity. And that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. If you like a class, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you so much.